Good morning, everybody. We're just getting our webinar started this morning. Looks like we got a handful of attendees that are still coming in. So we're just going to hold tight for a minute or two and give everybody a chance to get in and get settled, and then we'll get underway, okay? All right. Looks like we got a good group of people with us, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, our Building Safer Schools with Smart Security Strategies. I'm your host, Adam Benson. I'm the VP of Customer Operations here at Salient Systems, and today we've got a little bit of maybe something different than we've done in the past. We've got pretty exciting guests that we wanted to introduce you all to. We met this individual a few years ago when they were on their journey working through building a safer and some more secure environment for the school district that they were working in. And as we got to know them, we realized that this was a big process, that was happening, and there's a lot of parts to basically going through that process of getting to an end state of having a more secure school. We thought that perhaps some of the learnings and experiences that this individual went through might be useful to some of you if you were also considering going down that same path. So to that end, I'd like to introduce you all to Kathy Drenth. Kathy, good morning. Glad to have you
Good
here.
morning. Thank you. Always good to talk with you.
So, I kind of set up a little bit of, how we got introduced to each other, but can you maybe tell us a little bit about, what you're doing, what your role is, and, kind of what got you here?
Sure. So I'm a newly retired educator. I started doing school safety about 6 years ago when we were coming out of COVID, and I was the crazy teacher that offered to stay online for an extra couple of years. But that afforded me some time to be able to really get into some other areas of passion. And one of those areas was school safety. So I really leveraged that time to make some good changes for school, but I had no idea what I didn't know. I
Mhm.
really thought school safety was, just having some good plans and some good drills. And so I've had to learn a lot, and I'm glad for it. And I think our district is better for it.
That sounds awesome. So, speaking of learning a lot, I mean, was that just kind of a set of certifications and organizations that you joined? Was it kind of like a little by little incremental process? Like, what was that like?
Sure. So back in about 2017, we had a really dynamic emergency manager that embraced school safety and kind of made it her pet project. And our district really believed in what she was talking about. We were already doing things with school safety, but she really took things to a new level using the I Love You Guys Foundation for their language and really just writing our emergency operation plans. So when I got involved with that, there were just so many rabbit holes that we could go down with hardware and software and behavior threat assessments and best practices. I just couldn't learn enough. So there was no canned program at the time. I think we're doing a lot better with that now in supporting schools. But really, anything that said school safety, children safety, I was signing up for anything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, I hear you. So, I've learned a little bit from talking to you about those different organizations and, the process that you've gone through. I think maybe the best way that we can go into that is, go through or show the folks here the interview that we did. So, Kathy and I had a conversation a week or two ago, and we recorded that interview where we went through basically this entire process. So, what I'd like to do for you all now is just go ahead and get into that video. A little bit of housekeeping. As that video is playing, we're going to have some content that we'll be displaying right along along with it. Kathy and I will turn off our camera so you guys can hear the conversation and see the content that she's speaking to. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, feel free as the video is playing and the interview is happening to just go up to the QA section in your control panel there, drop your questions in. When the interview is done at the end of that session, Kathy and I will pop back on. We'll answer as many questions as we can for the time that we have. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and get this video started for you all. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process. I mean, you know, that you got the certifications, you've got the learning going on, you've got the drive, you've got the desire. It seems like a really big thing, you know, to try to go attack. So for you, you know, where did you start? Like, how do you get the ball rolling if it's, you know, time to make things better? Where do you go?
Sure. Well, you know, for me, again, it started with unifying that language in our district, and to unify our language and use best practices in our language like lockdown, secure, hold, etc. I needed to get into our emergency operation plans. Once I got into our emergency operation plans, I started to discover that there were mandates from our state government that required us to have certain things in place. And I could see that nobody was doing that. Or if they were doing it, they simply did it to check a box. It's done. It sits on a shelf. Nobody looks at it for another 2 years when it's due again. So one of those pieces inside of that emergency operations plan was something that they called a site assessment or a vulnerability assessment. And I knew that we didn't have a ton of money to hire companies to come in and tell us this information. And, you know, back in like 2018, I didn't even know of any companies that were doing it. But again, the federal government was there and they had some free resources online. And it was through searching and digging and Googling that I came across this site that had a free tool. And I started digging in. And as I was digging into this free assessment, I was so impressed because it was asking me questions about school safety that I had never thought of.
This is the CISA tool, the CISA tool?
It's actually through the Department of Homeland Security, although it does have other tools that you can use. It was through the Department of Homeland Security, this K-12 school safety assessment. And it caused me to look at school safety through multiple lenses. And since then, I've really discovered that when we talk about school safety, I spend a lot of time with superintendents and I give them a self-assessment. And I say, school safety is deep and wide. How are you doing with it? And they're like, oh, we're good. And I say, tell me more. And they say, we've got panic buttons in all of our buildings and our teachers wear them. And I say, that is fantastic. That is a huge hurdle. What else? We're good.
Right.
Ooh, security is deep and wide. So through using some of these tools, it helped me to peel back the layers of security. And one of those areas was just, you know, physical security and how do you monitor that? How do you control that? Through that assessment, then they gave me not only the data from what my answers were to that self-assessment, but then they gave me action steps. And that has really shaped, still, even today, it shapes everything that we do with our improvements and our practices.
Interesting. So that tool sounds pretty comprehensive. Can you tell me a little bit about what that tool process was like? I mean, is it something that's hard? Did it take you weeks of time to go get filled out, or what was the time investment to work through a tool like that?
Sure. Well, finding it was the key. So that hard part is over. Finding a person on staff to complete the assessment is what I think really slows schools down. Schools, we want to do the right thing. Most of us are very good rule followers. So we want to do the right thing. But sometimes if we've got money in our pocket, we want to pay somebody else to come in and do the work. And what I have found is there is a place for that. Our school just worked with a great company that gave us a beautiful report. What made it super powerful is that I could compare it with my own assessment of ourselves and then get some traction with where we're going to go in the next school year.
So
But
you did a self-assessment. You did a self-assessment, but you also were able to get a company do an equivalent, similar type of assessment and basically compare the two data points, kind of triangulate between them.
Indeed. So our state government rolled out some funding that allowed schools to have a consultant come in and do this assessment, which we're super grateful for. It didn't cost us anything, but we had already done our own for the last 4 years. And it's always good to have another perspective so that we're not filled with pride or a false sense of security or maybe an inflated impression of where we're at. It really has been helpful with the perspective. But I still do prefer doing it myself because I think that somebody on each staff needs to own the knowledge. At least one person needs to own the knowledge. It's our building. As I reviewed our report, that is nice. The first thing that was said as an area of improvement, a suggestion, I clearly needed to give them more information. They were here for 1 day. I didn't give them all of the information they needed. So I was grateful for the feedback, but sometimes they don't see everything when they're here just for a day.
That's really good advice. Yeah, because I mean, that is one of the double-edged swords of using third parties in some cases, right? Because you know your environment better and they know it on the surface level. And so they're going to make recommendations that may not be as comprehensive. So having those two things that you talk about, I think is really cool. Doing it yourself and doing the other. I want to circle back because you said this a couple times and you're talking about the team, basically, you know, the multifunctional kind of team. It takes a lot of people to make something like this happen and happen in an honest and earnest way. Can you tell me a little bit about that team creation process? Like, how do you find when everyone's got a bunch of different hats to wear? How do you find the right people to come together and do the type of assessment that it's, necessary to do to see success?
Sure. I learned some valuable lessons about team. Being the person that I am, I like to not burden other people with tasks because I know everyone's busy. So I owned a lot of this myself. And then when it came time to roll it out, there were challenges getting everyone else to have buy-in because really what I had created was my dream and my solutions and my systems. And there's just so much more power in having multiple people and perspectives and ownership in that. So then after I realized that, in assembling a team, I think there's some forced family fun in education. That forced family fun, the superintendent needs to be at the table.
Yeah.
Our top leader needs to know safety inside and out. And I always say on a bad day, when somebody wants to ask the top leader the hardest questions, we definitely want our superintendent speaking with authority. And they only can speak with authority if they know those systems inside and out. So that superintendent has to be at the table. The principals, the other administrators need to be at the table. And then, just best practices. Of course, it's good to have teachers at the table. We've included bus drivers when needed at the table. Custodial maintenance staff, especially when you're rolling out things that are going to affect the infrastructure, they have a place. Our tech department has a place. That's another area that can be learned the hard way. If somebody is spending $1 million but didn't run anything past the tech department, there can be some snags along the way. So just bringing everyone to the table that's normally at an administrative table, is pretty powerful. But then in East Jordan, we have loved pulling in our first responders. We really pride ourselves with letting our community know that our first responders know our plans and our hardware and our software as well as we do, because they're there that often.
Is it safe to say that when you were doing the assessments, the process of doing the assessment helps you identify all of these stakeholders that I hear you describing? At the beginning, you said superintendent, and that feels like, executive sponsorship. You basically have to have like an executive sponsor for the effort you're going to go do. But then the rest of it is identifying the right stakeholders, and having them contribute to their parts or their aspects of it. Is that kind of how you structured, or is that the approach that you were able to follow from the vulnerability assessment stuff?
I think inherently it just lended itself to that. It didn't specifically spell out who should be at the table, but
Right.
using best practices in school safety, we just know it has to be that multidisciplinary team. That pretty much is driving everything in every area of school safety. And the reality is, nobody wants to be on an island making these decisions alone. And that's been, a super important lesson that we've learned.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense. So you found your gaps through your assessment tool. You've identified your team. It's probably a little more complicated than that, right? There's more things that you have to go do. I'm assuming there's a money component, because change, oftentimes requires funding. So where would one start there? Like, what were some of the places that you were able to start sourcing the necessary fodder to start executing on this strategy?
So I started really with the dream first. When I looked at my vulnerability assessment and I saw the gaps in communication and infrastructure and planning, I looked at the gaps, and then I started creating this dream in my mind. Like, what would innovative and just really looking to the future for what would the future best practices look like? I developed the dream. And in my mind, my dream included many companies working together to make all of our systems work together. So I didn't start with the money, I started with the dream. Because if we start with the money, then it kind of gets weird. So
Plus, you don't know how much you need if you don't know what you're going to go do.
Exactly. So, as I think about dreaming big, like I dreamed really big. And a lot of the things that I was imagining, again, I'm a teacher, I'm coming from the classroom, they didn't exist.
Mm.
But what I found is that I was able to find the companies that understood what I was getting at, and then also could share in that dream and see how they could help create a solution to what we were looking for. So once the dream came, then I needed the dollars, and I needed a lot of dollars. I need thousands and thousands of dollars. So I just simply said, what do we have available to us? I didn't even know about grants. I didn't know about state funding. That, again, was out of my wheelhouse as a teacher. So I found a couple of state grants through the Michigan State Police. I applied for them. We got them. I couldn't believe it, So we got about $270,000 from our state through grants. Then I learned about a federal government grant, and that just seemed so overwhelming. I looked at the application, and I just thought, there's no way that I could manage that on my own. We needed so much data and community input and letters from senators. But what I found was a grant writer who was already doing it and had 95%, success rate getting the funding for schools. So we applied for that. And we got about $500,000 from the federal government. We had some bond money. We had some technology funds. So much of what we were doing included technology, so we could use that. And then there were just some general funds. And I found that our superintendent could go back to the school board and say,
Yeah.
If we're going to get $750,000 in grants, do you think we could afford 20,000 over here in this little area to get us started? So it really became dreaming first, finding the funding came. It was just being persistent and talking with lots of people just to learn from others who had success.
That grant writer, it sounds like, was kind of a game changer, right? Because that could be a really big roadblock. I mean, I know myself when I've looked at certain forms to go fill out, I've kind of, you just get intimidated that there's just too much there. So getting a resource to help, particularly if you're able to shop for one that has a high success rate, then it's a good way to spend a little to maybe to get a lot more to, to kind of go help fund things. It's pretty cool. So it sounds like the bigger number for you happened to be from federal funding. I would assume for different coordinators that are listening, you might have different available things at a state level. How, at least from your perspective in the state of Michigan, how did you go about the research process of finding that state funding that you talked about initially from, I think you said, the sheriff's office?
Yeah, the Michigan State Police is a close partner with our Department of Education. And actually, our Office of School Safety in Michigan is run through the Michigan State Police. So it's a really interesting dynamic there. It's not like that in other states. But what we found was the Michigan State Police, they send out notices to business managers in schools. They send out notices to superintendents. And a lot of times it's those administrators in schools that know when the government is sending out opportunities and funding. So it's tapping into the right people. I've also had really good success learning about opportunities by talking to the police chiefs and the sheriff's department and the emergency managers, because sometimes they get grant opportunities that they don't know what to do with because it's outside of law enforcement, but it's trying to facilitate partners in our community between law enforcement and schools, or emergency management and emergency operation plans. So really it's talking with top leaders, with the partners that could be involved. Those were the people that had the best leads on getting funding.
Yeah, I think it's like you said earlier, right? The dream, right? You have to have the vision, have the idea, and then you're kind of to a certain extent selling that vision to a lot of different places outside the direct scope of your school, to keep their eyes and ears open, and knowing that you're trying to solve a problem that they believe in, and then they're giving you feedback. It sounds like of funding they have available, and it becomes an assembly of a lot of different things, right? I mean, you put this together from not just one source. It's lots of different sources created the overall budget to go pursue the technology.
Right. And it's that partnership buy-in as well. When our partners in emergency management are valued and brought into this process, now they've got some skin in the game. They want to hear more about it. And what are you trying to do? And that whole idea of networking for the sake of safety is really impressive. The relationships that have come out of that are deep, and they're strong, and they're healthy. And it's a good way to start bridging law enforcement, fire and EMS, 911, and education before there's ever an emergency.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So let's talk a little bit about technology specifically. So we talked about identifying gaps. We've talked about the different ways to secure funding. How do we break into the right sizing conversation of tech needs? How would schools go about performing that process?
Sure. For East Jordan schools, we've really started looking at our non-negotiables. What things were we absolutely looking for, and in a company, in a product, in a service, and we started there. So that really helped the sorting out process. So when we were creating our bid proposal process, those non-negotiables were written right in there. So for East Jordan schools in particular, we had some hardware that was new and functioning well. And it was going to be a hard decision to tear out some things, for example, cameras and door access systems that were pretty new, just to replace it with something brand new. And so we really wanted to be good stewards of the funds that we had. So some of our non-negotiables, we needed to utilize some of the existing hardware. We started looking at phases. Phase one would be, integrating some old and some new. Phase two would be, tearing out some old that we weren't going to replace. And then, phase three may have been just what brand new pieces were we going to include. So that was a huge non-negotiable. Who, as far as a company and a product, would help us blend the old and the new? But then also part of that dream, and at the time, there was one company that I found that kept putting on almost a webinar or an informational session where they were selling the idea that maybe it's possible to have several pieces of safety equipment all interact. So a PA system that could access a message board, that could access a light. And it really made sense. I could see what they were talking about. The only problem was they wanted to sell everything as a package that was brand new, and I just couldn't afford it. It wasn't going to, the funds that I had were not going to go very far if I had to buy everything brand new. So then I started looking for partners, and those partners with cameras and PA systems and door access, those partners, the very first question I'd say, do you play nicely with other companies? Because I want to leverage what you're able to do with what other pieces of hardware and software are able to do as well. And so that also helped with the process.
So did you start when you were doing the evaluation for tech? Did you start at the manufacturer level once you decided I need them to be open? Or did you start at the installation company that's probably going to do the work for you and have them make recommendations, and then you go to those manufacturers? Like how would what was your process for choosing at a tech level the products?
For the most part, it came down to the contractor that was going to be doing the installations. Again, I was an educator. I have no IT background. I just have this dream, and I needed really smart people to help make it possible. And we found just the right contractor. The contractor that understood the dream, had people in place to make it all happen. And then our contractor knew the companies that could do what we wanted to have done. But then, just as luck would have it, there were also times that I was just clicking and searching. For example, with our message boards, I just happened to need a picture for a presentation. I grabbed something off of an image off the internet, and it was the lead that our company needed, our installers needed, to say, oh, we don't have a contract with that company, but let us reach out to them. The best success and the best partnerships that we have had have been with the companies that acknowledge we can make a relationship with another company for an integration. That has made all of the difference.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's typically why I think within this industry they're referred to as integrators, because it's not just one thing. It's a lot of different things, and it's their knowledge of the space. And it sounds like, your insertion of information that you found to create the solution for you that, was scalable and, was ready for the way that your structure and your budgeting basically was allowing you to go about solving the problem.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And, it really does also come back to relationships with everyone. It's the relationship with those contractors and the installers. And when you've got a good relationship, that helps throughout the entire process, right? Because the opposite is tragic. But then it's the relationship between the contractors and the companies that they're partnering with there has to be a lot of trust and honesty as you move forward together, because you're going to be in this for a long time. It's more than just an installation and in 1 month you never see these people again. We have found all of the companies and the contractors that we're dealing with, we're in a long-term relationship.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. So let's talk about results. We talked about the journey, how we got there, the entire scoping process that you went through, the selection processes, all of that fun stuff. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the end result, the net effect of all of the time put in and the work put in.
So the end result is pretty beautiful. It's not perfect, and we haven't arrived. I don't think anybody is going to fully arrive, because it's a process and it lives and it breathes. So we're comfortably in the middle of reaping the benefits of all of the hardware and software that we implemented. So we've owned the process of rolling it out for our own people. And when I say it's deep and wide. It's cameras, new camera software, it's door access, it's ID cards, it's lockdown buttons, silent alarms, blue lights, strobes, mass notification app. All of that has been brought into our fold to help support our plans and our processes, so that all of those tools are leveraged to help us be more safe. Nothing is in isolation, nothing stands alone. And what's really been important is that we are using these products on a daily basis. And in an emergency, they also help there too. So that was another huge component when we were looking at what do we add and what do we let go. So with our PA system, we needed a system that would also help us with our bells on a day-to-day basis. With our camera system, we needed a system that would help us with the small stuff, the backpack that was left, what door did a student go out, as well as
operational things. Yeah,
exactly. So, I feel, and our staff feels, that we have an increased level of safety. We feel more prepared. We feel more success in investigating things. If we have to go back and look at things afterwards, we feel pretty successful in preventing as much as we can. We always try to balance. We're a school, not a prison. So how can we maintain that school, community, family feel without making it seem like, we've got walls, 20 feet tall and they're impenetrable. And we've had success there. We've learned a lot of lessons that we happily share. We've really decreased that human error factor with having layered tools to help be safe. We layer our communication, for example, between our PA system with our app and so on. So we try to layer things, and then we're just constantly trying to build capacity so that people have confidence in the tools that we do have.
Yeah. What you said earlier, I think is a really interesting comment, that it's a beautiful system and it's not perfect and it's still developing. And I think that makes a ton of sense to me, at least, because, it's been my experience that security, to a certain extent, or to a very big extent, is reactionary. You can't imagine or envision all of the potential ways that, a threat can occur. A lot of times they have to happen once to figure out how you protect and respond against it. So keeping that kind of mindset that, it's never perfect, because there's going to be something and we're going to have to, adapt and adjust to it, makes a ton of sense. I also, what I'm kind of hearing from you is that it sounds like you're you're building a program, right? As opposed to just a technology, find funding, buy a tech, and be done. This seems like a program that gets implemented in the district. And am I right that this is kind of a blueprint or a model for other adjacent districts? They're kind of collaborating with, what was done in East Jordan to replicate success elsewhere?
Absolutely. We've got a unique environment in Northern Michigan, but I don't think it's exclusive to Northern Michigan. But in our environment, we're pretty rural. And what I've been really, really advocating is that in an emergency, we're all going to need each other. So we need to be speaking the same language. And if we can use the same hardware and the same software across our region, that would even make things that much easier. Emergency services has been doing that forever. We call it mutual aid because in an emergency, sometimes we need other departments to help. And the same is true in education. So East Jordan had our former superintendent, and now the baton has been passed. Our former superintendent hired me and yet allowed me to serve other districts if they needed a hand, because he had the understanding and the belief that we can't do this alone. And the more we help and include our neighbor in our plans and we train together, we invite them on our drill days to come and see what we do. We sharpen each other. We talk about best practices so that now within our school district, our larger intermediate school district, it's really no big deal for superintendents across district lines to say, what are you doing? Hey, would you come over and take a look at our, drills or whatever? Because we can't be in competition when it comes to school safety. We can with academics, and we can with enrollment, and we can, in other areas, but not school safety. So
I'm hearing a theme to what you're talking about. And each one of these, points where we've been talking about stuff, there's a collaborative approach to solving the problem. So the funding thing was, more than just what you can get directly. It's working with other individuals, leaders in different parts of the roles, collaborating with them, building the vision. It sounds like similarly, replicating success, you're collaborating with counterparts where we did it well here, and here's how we did it. And let's work together. So we're kind of coming out of the same page. So that's super awesome.
Agreed.
So let's talk a little bit about remote access. I know we've mentioned it a little bit before, but I want to dig into that some. What are some of the ways that remote access gets used within this program to support the needs?
I use remote access probably more than anything else. I've been able to use my app on the phone, whether I'm out of the country or I'm in another building, if it's morning, middle of the night, anytime, anywhere, to check the status of our safety. I love to be able to click into our camera system. Within 1 minute, I can swipe through every set of views across the entire district and see instantly if there's any motion in any cameras. I've caught a lot of wildlife, and that is fascinating. But I'm really happy to say that I haven't seen any intruders. So that's super helpful for me. It's super helpful for our administrators. It's also available to our law enforcement and 911. And this became a non-negotiable that I really stumbled upon. In my mind, I was thinking about, on a really bad day, if we had an assailant in our building and we were in a lockdown, my dream was that somebody on the outside with access to our camera could be communicating with law enforcement or 911 to say, your officer is in the red hallway and there's an assailant to their right 20 paces ahead. Or your officer is in this hallway and there's a kindergartner hiding who doesn't know what to do in this location. To have that bird's eye view and that real-time communication in that emergency is probably the best feature I can imagine. So
Yeah.
it's useful on a daily basis, but in that emergency, and then training our administrators that are not involved with an emergency to get into the camera system to be able to say what's going on from their safe location is part of our learning process, but it's there because they can do it and they value it.
Yeah. You said we talked about remote access to start with, and you said it's, remote access from outside the facility and it's also to inside the facility. So really, it's more than just remote access. It's more about mobility, like mobile access, where you have devices that, regardless of, whether you're in the facility or outside of the facility, they just work, and they give you the connectivity into the systems to help you do a lot of those operational things that you were talking about, the things that are just the day-to-day blocking and tackling of running a school. And that situational awareness point that you made for the first responders, I think that's a really, really strong one too. I mean, for those of us that have read the Department of Homeland Security evaluations of some of the terrible things that have happened in schools, that's a very recurring and common theme that, first responders can do a lot better, a lot faster if they have that degree of situational awareness. So I hear you on the value of that. Now, quick question about the way that you've got it set up. Do you have first responders access all the time, or is it something that you turn on and off based on lockdown procedures and other things?
So when it comes to our camera system, they're on all the time when they want to. And we just simply created an account for our local police department. We have a school resource officer that's also part of that department. So he's really their expert. He can access anything in the playback and the recordings.
Yeah.
But our system lives on their computer. And when it came to those partnerships, it was important that we chose all of our platforms to be able to be used with law enforcement and 911. And you can imagine and appreciate that their technology is really tight. You have to have a lot of permissions and settings that allow a police officer's computer to access something as open as video surveillance or door access.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And that SRO thing is really important because that ties back to that situational awareness again, right? They know the facility, they can be that voice, and give that feedback to additional first responders that maybe don't know the campus when they're coming in. So again, a really cool part of that, a part of that structure. So the last thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about is, the end result, the lessons kind of learned. It sounds like, what you've gone through was a longer process, took a while to go get implemented, and it's been in place for a while. It's been operating for a while. So can you give me some hot takes on some of the lessons that you've learned? What would be like one of the most important things for, folks who might be considering starting out on a journey like this to be on the lookout for?
Sure. What I've noticed is that I think that we look to check boxes. If we need something done, we get it done as quickly as possible. We check the box and we feel compliant. But school safety is more than compliance. It is the time where we really need to know what's in our plans, what we're going to do, and who's going to do it. Another thing that I've discovered is that people, and I think we're all guilty, people assume that the tool is going to somehow magically do something when a tool is just a tool. Like a hammer isn't magical until it gets in the carpenter's hand. So any of these school safety tools are not going to just simply do something. There really has to be an investment of somebody on campus that's taking care of the tool, whether it's monitoring it, rolling it out, whatever. The tool doesn't fix anything without a human component. So if you're going to buy the tool, you need to also invest in the person on campus that's going to be responsible for it. That all takes attention, effort, energy, training, monitoring. But the reality is it's just going to sit there. I think
Mhm.
about a vape sensor. If that vape sensor isn't working properly, it just sits there. If it's
Yeah.
malfunctioning, then people just start disregarding it. And that was never the intention of that type of technology. And that's across the board. There has to be somebody that's monitoring things and following up to make sure that it's being used to its fullest extent possible with fidelity. So we need to know. We need to know who's going to be assigned to that. And then we also have to build capacity. That role can't just be one person's job. Several people need to own a piece of that monitoring, or the troubleshooting, or the use of, because if anything happens to one person, if we don't have, the capacity built within our own school family, that knowledge and expertise goes away with the person. So we need to make sure that multiple people know how to use things. And just that daily use, with that just gives us that procedural memory when we need
Mhm.
it in an emergency. So very few things should be reserved for emergencies only. We should really develop the comfort level of using things daily. Even things like a fire alarm pull station. I think about teachers that would be terrified to pull that fire alarm if they smelled smoke. I think that they would want to go, they would want to see, they want to confirm. They don't want to use a fire extinguisher because maybe they don't need, they ask way too many questions because that pull station has only been reserved for administrators or
Mhm.
for, a fireman. So we need to have people using these things on a more consistent basis.
Makes a ton of sense, I mean, building the capacity, making sure that you're actually using the tools that you're purchasing as opposed to expecting that they're going to go do stuff, and getting muscle tone. If you use it every day, then it's not this weird different thing that you don't know how to operate. It just has to. You're really what you're talking about is integrating the whole solution, kind of at a deep level across the school, so that it's not just a set it and forget it kind of thing. Just everybody's got a part to play, and you need to use the equipment, use the systems, use the program in the way that it was intended to be used.
Right. And I think it's powerful to have a leader. We all have leaders, right? In every system we have leaders. It's okay to have a leader of these things. That leader just can't own all the knowledge. And that was probably one of my biggest takeaways. It
Yeah.
really needs to start as the team. You can have a team leader, but the team has to have all of that buy-in and the say, so that it's not just my dream, but it's our dream.
Well, Kathy, that was pretty cool. A lot in that journey, that overall experience. So hopefully there were some pieces of information for those of you out there that's useful. Maybe some tips and tricks and things that you can consider if you're starting to go down that path. What we'd like to do now is transition over to the Q&A period. I'll go ahead and check our Q&A sections, and I'll check chat and see what we have for questions. So let's take a quick look here. All right. So one of our questions is about the tool, the self-assessment tool. The question was where can I find that tool? I think we've got a link for it, but I'll drag it over. Kathy, can you help talk to us about the tool? This is the right site, correct?
That is the right site. And I have to
Okay.
say that it's buried. So once you find it, mark it in several places, because even I have a hard time going back to find it. But once you find it, it will download as an Excel file on your computer, and then you don't have to keep searching. But you're
So
correct
it's
on that site. You can see, instead of a flashy blue button, it lives just as a hyperlink. So
okay.
if you
Got it.
select
Yep.
that,
Got it. I downloaded it here.
perfect. So this introductory page just tells you a little bit about it, but you'll notice at the bottom, Adam, that there are tabs. And
Yep.
really, this is one tool that you can use for your hardware and software. We know, of course, school safety also includes so many other things like behavior threat assessments and whatnot, but this is just really a glimpse for hardware and software. So you can see at the bottom, like you're on fencing and gates right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you click on the CCV and the VSS, I believe
Yep.
that's our video surveillance system. I'd love to just show people how easy this is. So say you read the question on the left, does your school have a camera system? So if you mark something there, notice in that far right-hand column, it kind of gave you some suggestions there, but go ahead and scroll down and just answer a couple of those other questions if you would.
Okay, just going to randomly click a few things.
Yes, of course, it's related to your school and your environment.
Yep.
So as you go through these tabs, the system is creating your own data. So if you click on the next tab over that says summary.
Oh, okay.
So you can see, you've answered some questions in that video surveillance area, and it's given you some information. That's super cool. But then in the next tab over, if you go to the action items, this is actually what I used when I was looking at writing those grants or asking for money. And so it told me this information gave me two important pieces of information to use in two different places. One, in asking for money, and two, in our emergency operation plans, we have to say what our plan for improvement is every year. Or every 2 years rather. So I just come back and I do this assessment after we've done a big maintenance project or an upgrade. I'll go back and do this again, or at least every 2 years. And I can say, well, is there any low-hanging fruit that we can mark off that is easy?
Right.
Or do we need to write perhaps another grant for some more funding?
Wow, it's pretty awesome. It seems like it's pretty simple. Just got to read through the questions, answer them, and it kind of sends you down that path. All right, let's look for a couple more questions. We've got a question from Brian, Brian D out there. So the question is, did you start with a single location or assess multiple schools? And there's a second part, which is, did you integrate access control and alarms with video? And the third part, do you have any level of continuous active security alarm or video monitoring? So on the first one, single location or multiple schools?
Sure. So I did a vulnerability assessment for each school. So in East Jordan, we have 3 buildings, and I did one for each building. And that was helpful because they're all unique. But then I have to use it in each building's emergency operation plan.
Okay. And then integrating access control and alarms with video. Did you make those systems talk?
Access control and video surveillance. We do not have that integration currently, but that is something that is on our plate that we're working with our contractor to look at. As I've gotten all of these independent companies, and I have so many screens to pull up on my desktop, I really am pursuing that one screen that can tell me lots of information. So that's in our next phase.
And it was intentional, right? You want to do it. It was part of your design. You just don't have that part connected yet. I gotcha.
Correct.
Okay. And then the last part of that question was, do you have any level of continuous active security alarm or video monitoring?
So active security alarm, I'm not sure I understand exactly where to go. We do have on our door access, we've got door prop alarms, and we've got notifications through our door access system if a door's been propped open. So that would be any real-time data that we would get notified about. And if I didn't answer that, let me know and I'll follow up after.
All right, got it. Okay. Any other questions out there? I'm checking over in the chat section to see if we have anything. Let me just scrub through real quick.
As you look for that in regards to that last question, we we'll start to have our administrators and our school resource officer receive those notifications in real time when those door props are activated.
Okay, gotcha. Looks like there's a lot in chat here, but a lot of good feedback from the folks out there, but I'm not picking up any questions in there. So it looks like we got most of those addressed. All right, let me head back over to QA real quick. All right. Well, looking like we got a fair amount of them handled. We'll give it a second or two for any additional last minute ones if anybody out there's got any that they're thinking about. Okay, looks like we might have one. Legacy systems. The question is related to dealing with older platforms or legacy systems. So, how did you handle the challenge of integrating old hardware with the newer solutions or newer tech that you wanted to go get?
Sure. Some contracts that we had to just weigh, for example, our video surveillance. We had another partner that we loved. And yet, because they weren't able to work with other companies, we had to make the decision to break that, partnership so that we could go with somebody else to be able to have it integrate with everything. So that was unfortunate. We weren't looking forward to doing that. It was just the nature of the beast as we were putting our eyes on the horizon. So some people, have like just ridden out those contracts. If they had a 3-year contract, they write it out and then they just make those upgrades part of another phase.
Okay, gotcha. Looks like we got one more that came in. Will probably be our last one that we'll be able to answer here. Continue, anybody out there, if you've got some, to type them up, send them in. We'll get to them and then send a follow-up email out respond to you directly with emails on it. We're also going to send out this link afterwards. So let's hit this last question here, Kathy. The question is from Todd Endel. Are you familiar with the Critical Response Guide, CRG, as the acronym, digital mapping of school buildings for first responders?
Yes. Yes,
Cool.
indeed. Another tool that gives us information.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, those of you that have sent over the thank yous and the hand claps and thumbs up, thank you so much. I'm glad this was useful. Kathy, I really appreciate you taking the time to help share the journey that you went on. Like I said earlier, hopefully some of the things that you've encountered are useful, learning points or things that can help other people that are on the same kind of journey. So thanks again for spending the time. Thanks everybody for your attendance, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.